segues very well into our next speaker's session, which is on data on gender and looking beyond the basic minimum. And Professor Tripathi has been doing some of this work on geographical diverse data and granularity. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Disha. Now, to just build on a point that Professor Panna made right now, that the collegium has significantly, shrunk the pool of candidates it selects the data its judges from. It's not simply that now most of the Supreme Court judges are from amongst the Chief Justices. The fact of the matter is 43% of all High Court judges appointed by the collegium come from the subordinate judiciary. But only 4% of those judges become Chief Justices. So in a career avenue which is significantly a bit more objective, a bit more regulated, where women have a chance of progress, the number of Chief Justices appointed from that pool is only 4%. So I completely concur with her when she says that this is not a pipeline problem, because the entry level of women at the bar, at the bench, at the judiciary is there, but there have been significant barriers which impede their progress to the higher positions. I'll just give an example from something that I'm working on right now, which is unpublished. So we are looking at impact of affirmative action in subordinate judiciary in increasing women representation in district judiciary. And we see that there's a positive correlation that once you have an affirmative action scheme, more women get entry into the judiciary over a period of time. But what happens to them after that? So when we looked at Odisha, for example, we recognize that if you're a woman judge, if you're a judge, then having leadership positions in certain institutions like High Court Registry, Judicial Academy, the Law Department, or the State Legal Services Authorities, these are very important signifiers of your future possibility of becoming a High Court judge, because that's where you build your connections, that's where you build your familiarity with the system. Now, over a 12-year period from 2010 to 2022, out of 196 appointments made to these positions in Odisha, only 11 were women. And it's not because there are not sufficient number of women in those eligible cadres. This is a very conscious choice where women are not included in these leadership positions, which then subsequently impacts their capacity to be considered, right, for a judgeship. So it's not something that the High Court collegiums can wash their hands off, because they are the ones who are recommending who will become a High Court judge, and they are the ones who are deciding who gets to be considered for these positions in the first place. So if women judges do not have sufficient experience, 10, 20 years into their service or 15 years into their service, in these important administrative positions, it's the same High Court which is responsible for it. So they're not in a position to assert that, we do not have enough women judges from the subordinate judiciary that we can recommend for High Court judgeship. Now, data, one of the things that I wanted to emphasize upon, which I was sharing with Professor Aparna and Apurva also earlier, is that we have a lot of descriptive data about what is the state of gender representation in judiciary, at the higher judiciary level also, at the lower judiciary level also. It follows a similar pattern about what is the number of women judges at a particular given point of time. That is, let's say today is 22nd March 2025. As of date, all over India, how many judges are women, High Court judges are women. Or we can do a time analysis also, that okay, in the last 20 years, since collegium came into existence, over the last 50 years, over the last 10 years, how many judges are women? That is one. Then we look at the tenure that they have, at what age they are being appointed, and how long they're serving in the judiciary. But for us to talk about data helping reform, data has to go beyond this. And it needs to enable us to do a couple of things. So I'll just give an example. I was just reading through the note that was there as a part of the sheet which was given to us, where there's an analysis of Justice Chandrachud's tenure as the Chief Justice of India, and how throughout his tenure, he has failed to appoint any women judge to the Supreme Court. My concern there is, why is this question being asked only about Chandrachud? Why not Justice Kaul? Why not Justice Ajay Rastogi? Why not Justice Joseph? Why not Abdul Nazir? Because when Chandrachud was the Chief Justice, all these judges served for a prolonged period as members of the collegium. And as members of the collegium, they have an influence, they have a stake in how the appointment process is happening. There is enough evidence, both anecdotal and official, which shows that it's not the Chief Justice is the sole driver of collegium appointments. Individual judges, when they can, when they want, they can control the agenda to a significant extent. The reason this is not happening is we do not know who the collegium members are. Today I'm sitting in a room full of people who are very passionate about this particular subject, but I'm very sure if I were to ask that can we say in 2005, who were the collegium members who appointed Justice Markandeya Katju to the Supreme Court? Barely any one of us will be able to say. Or Justice D.K. Jain. I'm just dropping names randomly, not with any specific. Yeah? But we'll be barely able to say because we do not know who are the people who are making these decisions about appointments. When we say collegium, we are making these people invisible who have decided things. The collegium is becoming a veil behind which actual decision makers, their legacy is rarely being questioned. So the first thing that we need, to continue on that thread, when we are talking about High Court judges, what's the point of blaming Chandrachud? Because Chandrachud can only consider recommendations which have been sent by High Court collegiums. So I'll just give you one small statistics here. From 1993 to 2021, collegium appointed in Odisha High Court 4% judges who are female. In Karnataka High Court, 6.2% judges, 6% judges who are female. In the last 4 years, Odisha appointed 0 judges. And Karnataka has appointed 1. Now we should ask this question to the Chief Justices and the collegium members in Odisha High Court and Karnataka High Court that after 3 decades of track record where their female representation was less than 5 or just about 5, why in the last 4 years no judges have been recommended by them? So data needs to enable us to ask questions to the correct people who are responsible for these decisions that are being taken. We need publicly available record of which collegium appointed which judges, which collegium member was involved in which appointments, which collegium rejected which judges, how long was their tenure. And this data we need not simply at the Supreme Court level, we also need at the High Court level. So if data has to facilitate reform, it needs to enable us to ask questions to the right people. And then it also needs to help us ask better questions. And that we can do only when we know more about the selection process. For example, 2017 to 2019, we knew from each High Court what names were recommended. Not because the High Court collegiums shared that data, but because the Supreme Court collegium resolutions recorded that data. Since 2019, we do not have data available. We only have the final recommendation. It's just like a draft of a press release which will be eventually released by the government. Not simply that, collegium resolutions since then are not signed. The PDF uploaded in the Supreme Court website does not carry the name of judges who have resolved that particular decision. Now, I am at a loss to point out any other constitutional functionary, any other constitutional authority which can upload decisions, official decisions, without specifying which committee, which person. It's just a blank PDF document. What it does is that it stops us from analyzing. Because the merit of an appointment can only be assessed when you can compare it with the merit of a candidate who has been rejected. Even when we are appointing MTA staff in our universities, we need to publish the list of shortlisted candidates. Then we need to upload the list of selected candidates. Because that allows not simply the candidates, but for the public at large to be aware that, okay, if this person has been found better, better than whom? And that information needs to be available. And I understand that if they're not willing to share that information, then yes, even if we get anonymized information, that is better. But when we are talking about a normative standard of data that will help reform, we need to have information which is not anonymized. We need details just like we have for every other public office. Then we need more data on, and this is the last point that I will make at this point. Often our discussion on gender diversity stops at whether enough women have been appointed to the bench or not. We need also better data on what happens after they have been appointed to the bench. I'll give an example. The last time a female judge, being a member of the Supreme Court collegium, was involved in the appointment of a Supreme Court judge was 2006, when Justice Ruma Pal was the second puisne judge and was involved in the appointment of Justice D.K. Jain, Justice Karjo, etc. So the fact that over a very long period of time, 4 women have only become members of the collegium, and only 2 of them, Justice Manohar and Justice Ruma Pal, have been involved in the appointment of any other Supreme Court judge. Other 2 members retired without being involved in any appointment at all. And this is deliberate. We know this is deliberate because Mr. Gogoi has been very kind enough to record it in his autobiography, that when the collegium is appointing judges, they're very conscious that if I appoint this person at this date, our current Chief Justice, very deliberate appointment, that we need to appoint him, and we need to appoint him now so that he will become a Chief Justice. It's recorded officially. So it's not that the collegium is just looking at the best possible candidate and someone from amongst them gets to become a member of the collegium, gets to become the Chief Justice. It doesn't happen like that. It happens very deliberately. So we need to have better data on what happens to women judges after they have been appointed to the bench. What kind of cases are being assigned to them? Are they being given administrative leadership positions? For example, I gave the example of district judiciary. The same thing applies to High Court also. There's a lot of administrative leadership which happens at the High Court level. Are women judges being given those positions or not? What kind of bench allocation is happening, right? Behavioral data during court proceedings. For example, in the US, they've been able to identify whether lawyers interrupt questions by female judges more often than by male judges. Right? Because one battle is to get enough women on the bench. But if we stop the battle only at that, we'll have the same problem which we're currently facing with the district judiciary. That we have a lot of women entering the workforce at the entry level, but because the post-appointment parity is not there, not enough of them are then subsequently rising to leadership positions. So for data to enable reform, true reform, it needs to enable us to do all these things. We get to ask questions to the right people who are responsible for the decisions. They cannot hide behind the cloak of a collegium, a council, a committee, anything like that. There have to be names. That so-and-so judge was involved in how many appointments? Why none of them were women? Another interesting fact, of the 2 judges, collegium members, female collegium members who were involved in the appointment of Supreme Court judges, none of them were involved in the appointment of another female judge. Justice Manohar and Justice Ruma Pal, they were never involved in the appointment of another female judge. In caste, it is different. Judges from marginalized caste, when they have been in the Supreme Court collegium, they have been involved in the appointment of other marginalized caste judges. And we need to be able to ask better questions about the merit of the selection. Because if we only get to know who has appointed, without any data on how that selection has happened, it will not enable us to critique that selection at all. So I think I'll just take a pause here. Thank you.